Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. This time I want to have a video game discussion vid, the way I usually do with comics. The topic is, how do I know what's a rare game? I can't tell you what a rare game is for every system. I certainly can't, and I wouldn't even attempt to. But what constitutes a rare game, a pricey game? Is there a difference between the two? Yes, there is. Now, sometimes games, whether it's PlayStation or Saturn or whatever, sometimes games are very expensive, but they're not necessarily rare. Doesn't mean that they're common either, but it doesn't mean that they're, my God, they're like super rare. They have such a low print run and all of that. Not necessarily. One of the reasons why some of those games would be more than what you would think you'd pay for a 20-year-old game is because they're desirable. They're collectible, okay? Much like what I was showing you, I made a video showing some PlayStation games, and in the first video I showed Alundra, which is a working designs game. Now, all working designs games mostly have variant discard. There are fans out there, video game fans, that want to get every variant for that game or working designs game. So therefore, they're willing to spend a little bit more to get them, to complete their collections. They may not be out there trying to flip these games or trying to sell them, but they're genuinely interested in Alundra, which is a great game. The puzzles will drive you crazy, but it's a great game. Working Designs usually released some pretty cool games, and they're known for coming out with great disc art and even great cover art. So there are collectors out there. There's a market for that. And that's why a game like that will be expensive, or more than what you would expect to pay. Okay, it's not hundreds of dollars. All right, and sure, there are discard out there for working designs. That's a little less common than the others. There's discard out there for working designs games that's pretty common, and some not so common. And that raises the prices too. It raises the prices across the board. All right, especially for the rare, what is called the rarer discards out there. So that's why some games go for a lot more, and there are games out there that are rarer than others. For instance, let me reach over. Here we have a game, Suikoden. PlayStation fans know exactly what this is. This game probably run you maybe about $50, so it's not really that big of a deal. But here's the thing with Suikoden. I wouldn't say that this one is necessarily rare. It didn't sell well. And I think when it came out, the reviews weren't that kind. This came out in 1996, and it was a 2D role-playing game. Not unlike games that were coming out for the last couple of years on Super Nintendo, Super Famicom. So when it came to the PlayStation, I think the reviewers, not the fans, reviewers, like people from Game Informer, Game Fan, they wanted to see the next level of role-playing game. And seeing a game that looks like it could have come out on the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis wasn't it, and they were harsh with it. So they were more harsh aesthetically. They were harsh with the aesthetics of the game. And I think did not really give that much credit to the fact that the game was fun to play. The story was pretty cool. I mean, I don't think any story in a video game is super cool, just as way I don't think any story in a comic book is super cool. You have stories that stand out more than others and are enjoyable, and I think that was one of them with Suikoden. And it really had a unique feature that you could recruit over 108 characters, and if you get all of them, you get the best ending. And it gives you replay value to want to go and see what characters you didn't get the first time around. So it creates a real fun experience, and I think things like that were overlooked. People were so concerned, reviewers were so concerned about, well, the graphics look like I could have played this on Super Nintendo, which may or may not be true. I think they were a little bit better than Super Nintendo, but I'm not a reviewer. So because of that, I think it hurt the Suikoden series. And as a result, when Konami decided to make Suikoden 2 and release it in the United States, they came out with a very limited print run because the first Suikoden did not sell that well, I think largely because of reviews. So even though they made Suikoden 2 and they were planning to release it in the United States, the fans like myself who loved Suikoden when it first came out, they were just going to release a certain amount, and then they released Suikoden 2. I bought this day one because I was a fan of the first Suikoden, and I saw a review on it. Now, Game Informer gave this a great review. It gave it a 9. So they really came through with the review. Unfortunately, I think the damage was done by then, and not many people bought this game. It was an abysmal failure when it comes to selling in the United States. But Konami kind of figured that was going to be. So they released it in a very limited print run. And that's why it became rare. And it became desirable. So it has both of those things. It's a desirable game, and it is legitimately rare. It will probably cost you like about maybe $150, $175 complete. And I've said this before, I very rarely tell anybody to spend that kind of money on a video game. But if you are going to spend that kind of money on a PlayStation video game and you like role-playing games, I would definitely recommend you get Suikoden 2. If you could buy it on the PlayStation Store for $4.99, $5.99 downloadable content, not downloadable content, excuse me, a downloadable version of the game. But if you're the type of game that's like, well, I kind of like having the original copies, the physical copies, much like with comics, I like having the original comics in my collection, I would say go for it. Spend the $175. It's definitely worth it. Great game. And if you played the first one, you could, you say you have a save file on the memory card. You could load it into this one and unlock certain features. You could do that with all the Suikoden games. I think you could do it for all of them, even the PlayStation 2 ones. Go figure, right? But it was truly a great series. But this right here is an example of, okay, it's just a rare game because of previous reviews on previous entries, and it left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, and that's why it affected how much was actually released here in the States. So that's just a quick example on why some of the differences between well not necessarily the differences, but answering the question on why some games are rare and why some games are not rare. Why some games are very expensive. Are they rare? Are they not rare? It answers some of those questions. As for exact print runs and all that stuff, I'm sure there are resources on the internet that will tell you what the print run of a game was, just as you could find resources about comic books and print runs and variants and all that stuff. The internet makes things like that very easy, more easy than what it was for me when I first started collecting 20 years ago, when we didn't have all that information. We just had word of mouth. Okay, so that's why some of these games are more expensive than others. Sometimes it's not because they're rare; it's because they're collectible, like the Working Designs games, and desirable. And sometimes it's because it is rare, like Suikoden. Thank you for watching. Take care.